Hi, I'm Brad Paul. I've worked and lived in the Tenderloin on and off for the last 30 years, and I was asked to build a model of my perspective of what the Tenderloin is, and that's what this is. And it was actually a lot of fun. The more I got into it, I couldn't stop. I kept adding stuff. But to orient you, this is sort of Eddy Street here, Ellis Street here, just in general representation. So this is the eastern part of the Tenderloin. This is City Hall, and this is Civic Center. And as I started doing it, I kept changing things. So there have always been people to try to change the Tenderloin. And it can be slumlords who just want to make as much money as they can and hurt people and cause pain to tenants. It can be bad developers who want to build stuff that's totally out of scale. And I want to say that there are good developers in the Tenderloin and good landlords. So they're not all that way, but that's usually what people are worried about. So these dinosaurs, Godzilla and whatever these creatures are, and the Riddler from Batman, and I think this is one of the bad guys from Star Wars, represent those people coming in. And in a traditional American play, you'd have the superheroes, which we had to choose from. We could have put Superman or Batman or, you know, people from the good guys from Star Wars here. But instead, it's people who live in the neighborhood. And this line is a representation of the zoning that we put in place in 1985 to protect the neighborhood from an onslaught of 20 to 30 to 40-story buildings, which is what was planned for this whole area. There was a plan to just turn this into the new downtown. And so it was the residents who got together and said, we like it the way it is. We want to live here. We want to improve it, but we don't want to turn it into this. So they were the ones, and this guy is a baker. A lot of the people in the Tenderloin live and work in the hotels nearby. It's what they can afford, and they can walk to work. So that's who he symbolizes. And these are basically people who work in the neighborhood, live in the neighborhood, and a few that work in the neighborhood that want to protect it. There's a woman here in a briefcase and a suit, and she represents sort of the lawyers and planners that help the residents do what they needed to do. They had technical assistance from some very committed professional people, but they were in the background. It was really the residents that did that. And as you look through this neighborhood, there's lots of people on the street talking, doing things together, because that's the way the Tenderloin is. That's where a lot of activity takes place. A lot of people live in SROs or small studio apartments, and so they get out when they can to talk to people and do things and go to cafes and restaurants. When I started designing this, I'm kind of a frustrated planner and architect at heart, so I started building real houses and real buildings, but I started taking things away. So I took the walls away on most of these, so there's just one wall or a piece of a wall to indicate how much of the life in the Tenderloin takes place outside of your room and your building. This one I left deliberately with very high walls because there are still people in the Tenderloin that were 10 years ago and there are now who are sort of isolated in their units. They're isolated because they physically can't get out, because they're afraid to go out, because people in their building intimidate them. So I don't want to present this as this is, you know, nirvana. There are lots of problems still in the Tenderloin. So this building represents the people who don't get to go out and do what they want to do. And this City Hall, this is the ghost of mayor's past or city government past. This guy looks like an evil ward boss, and there's a snake under his feet here. And when I first moved to San Francisco, this is who ran the city. There was the end of one era of politicians in San Francisco who were mostly white men and mostly interested in what they could get out of this for themselves and their friends. And when people went to City Hall, it was a very uninviting place. Basically, you were told to get out, shut up, you know, go away. And they were always pointing at the Tenderloin saying, this is the problem, we got to get rid of this, we got to replace it with these high-rises. And if you come around here, you'll see there's a cop out front, but it's a woman. And when I came to City Hall, all the police officers and sheriffs were men. And now when you go into City Hall, you're just as likely to see a woman sheriff or a woman police officer as a male, and people of color as well. And if you look inside, there's a much more representative group of people in there who are the people that are both making the decisions and speaking. What they're doing is they're driving the snakes out of the whole City Hall. That's what these are, symbolic of St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. Although I like snakes as pets, but their symbol is not the best. So they're all being pushed out. And the other thing that I try to put in here is a lot of art. So there's a sculpture here, there's sculptures in Civic Center, in Bodecker Park. There's one in particular that I think is still there, they put back after the rehab. A couple of other things. This is a sort of representation of both St. Anthony's, St. Boniface Church, the health clinic that's there. It's the social services that are there to support the neighborhood that have been there for a long time. And this is the Tenderloin National Forest. So there's the redwood tree, there's sculpture and art, and there's people using it. Which again, I think those spaces are really important to the neighborhood, to create that third space for people to enjoy the neighborhood, to get some respite from the intensity of some of the main streets. Market Street is off here. I was going to put a bunch of trucks, but it got cluttered because there's so much development going on Market Street. But I think this captures, and this is another line of people keeping out more, people that want to turn the Tenderloin into everything else in America and take away its unique qualities. And so they're being held back again by the people in the neighborhood who are organized to do that. So when I think of the Tenderloin, this is actually what I think of in my head as a model of what it has been and what it continues to be, and hopefully what it'll be in the future. This is, I put these guys up in here because this kind of represents the more commercial aspects of life. You got Tony the Tiger, Mr. Potato Head, and some pterodactyl from some Disney movie. So that's both a high-rise building, but also a representation of the financial district, the Union Square retail area. It's always been pushing this way, but it's been kept back by the people who've protected the neighborhood for many, many years. And I think that's it.
Could you describe the different elements of power in the Tenderloin?
So there's I would say kind of centers of authority.
Yeah.
And there are community leaders, people that have been in the neighborhood for a long time and some relatively new, who people look to as sort of the wise people in the neighborhood. And they're from different communities. They can be from the Indo-Chinese community, the African-American community, the senior community. And so those are sort of some of who these people are. Mm-hmm. The people, the larger people you see here. They're the people standing on these, whatever these things are, to protect the neighborhood. And they are people that are committed to their community, which can sometimes be a subset of the larger Tenderloin. But they're people that have been around for a while that people know and trust. They have a personal relationship. And then you have the institutional leaders, which are the people who may not live here, but come here every day, to doctors at St. Anthony's Clinic, or people that serve people at St. Anthony's Dining Room, or people at TNDC that do tenant services and community organizing, like Lorenzo. So that's another group of leaders in the community. But it's fairly diverse. There's not like one person that says this is what we're going to do. And I think that's the strength of it, because if you have just one or two people and they die, move on, get bought off, whatever, you're in deep trouble. You really need a diverse leadership. And I can name 20, 30 people that I've worked with for 20 years in Tenderloin. They're still there. And that's fairly unique because they're so committed to the neighborhood, they don't want to leave. They could, but they don't want to, because they love coming to work here and living here. But that's, and then you've got people more and more in City Hall. The enemy used to be City Hall and Hastings Law School, because they were the ones that were always trying to do bad things, level buildings, put up ugly buildings. And over time, the leadership at both Hastings and City Hall has changed to where there are now people in power there. I think of David Seward at Hastings, or members of the City Council and departments in City Hall that actually understand how special the Tenderloin is, and in their own way are trying to protect it to the best they can. They don't always have the ability to do that, particularly people in City Hall, because no one person gets to make the decisions. And unfortunately, people who are elected to highest office at City Hall are obligated to a number of people who got them there and who pay for their campaigns and continue to pay for their reelection campaigns. So I never put my hope in a person who's a mayor, and to a lesser extent people on the City Council, because it's up to the people here to go there and say, this is what we want, this is what we need.